Denver, a peaceful city with tree-lined streets and quiet suburbs, was home to the Williams family. Their two-story colonial house sat neatly on Maple Street, its lawn trimmed to perfection, white picket fence gleaming under the afternoon sun. Outsiders would often marvel, a picture-perfect American family. Amanda's father, Harold Williams, was an engineering manager at an aerospace company. Her mother, Grace, was a devoted elementary school teacher, admired by colleagues and neighbors alike. With their polished appearances, they carried themselves in the community as exemplary parents. But that image was nothing more than a facade, a carefully painted mask that concealed the fractures within. From a young age, Amanda could feel the difference in how her parents treated her compared to her older sister Tiffany. Tiffany, 3 years Amanda's senior, was always the one placed on a pedestal. When Tiffany wanted to take ballet lessons, their parents immediately enrolled her in one of the most prestigious academies in Denver. Costumes, pointe shoes, stage props, everything was the best money could buy. Every weekend, Harold and Grace eagerly chauffeured Tiffany to class, filming her every move as if documenting the rise of a future star. And Amanda, when she asked to learn piano, her mother sighed and said, "The expenses are already too much, settling instead for a bargain-rate neighborhood class." Amanda practiced on an old, worn-out piano, its keys chipped and uneven, forcing her to teach herself more than she was taught. The contrast became a painful refrain, repeated over and over until Amanda realized she would never be their first priority. By 16, Amanda was working part-time at a local bookstore just to cover her own expenses. Meanwhile, Tiffany received a brand new car for her 18th birthday. Amanda stood on the sidelines watching Tiffany beam as she slid into the driver's seat of the shiny sedan, while inside her own chest rose a sharp mix of bitterness and longing. Their parents turned to Amanda and said, "You need to learn independence, Amanda. You have to understand the value of money." They never noticed the irony. Tiffany never worked a single day in her life, yet she was showered with luxuries. There were moments when Amanda desperately sought recognition, only to be met with silence. In 7th grade, she won 2nd place in a statewide writing contest, a rare achievement for her age. She rushed home with her certificate, expecting smiles of pride. Instead, her mother called Tiffany downstairs, excited to gush about Tiffany's upcoming ballet recital. Amanda's award was left on the kitchen counter, buried beneath unpaid bills and grocery flyers. Another time, after months of practice, Amanda performed at her high school concert. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Amanda searched the crowd for her parents' faces, but under the spotlight, she saw them focused not on her, but filming Tiffany, who sat in the audience simply wearing a brand new dress. That night, Amanda understood the stage lights would never shine for her. It was the kind of wound that made no sound, but cut deep, festering through repetition. Amanda learned to stay quiet, whispering to herself, "I just have to be stronger, smarter, better. Then they'll notice me." But the more she pushed herself, the further away their recognition seemed. Her teenage years became a blur of studying and working, selling books, waiting tables, tutoring after class, just to buy her own supplies. Every night when she returned home, Tiffany was flaunting shopping trips, vacations, or another extravagant gift. On holidays, Amanda hoped for even a small present, but her parents always said, "You need to learn to save." Meanwhile, Tiffany unwrapped expensive cameras, new phones, or elegant gowns. The cruelty wasn't in the lack of material things, it was in the absence of fairness and affection. Amanda longed for a simple hug, a word of encouragement, an approving glance. Instead, she got constant reminders to do better. She told herself maybe her parents wanted her to be resilient, but deep down, she knew it was just a justification for their favoritism. At family dinners, Tiffany was always the center of conversation. Their parents asked about her classes, her teachers' praise, her hobbies. Amanda sat quietly waiting for someone to ask about her day. When the questions finally came, they were never about dreams or feelings, only responsibilities. Did you finish your homework? Are you saving your money? As time passed, Amanda grew up in silence, swallowing tears and turning pain into drive. But within her was a fracture, an ache born from craving love while bracing herself for abandonment. Behind the polished portrait of a perfect Denver family lay another truth, a young girl striving to prove her worth, yet drowning in the shadow of a sister adored without effort. It was a quiet suffering unseen by others, but etched deeply into Amanda's soul, shaping her for the battles yet to come. When Amanda turned 18, she already understood one truth with painful clarity. If she wanted to go far, she could only rely on herself. After years of shelving books at the local store, serving coffee, and doing odd jobs, she had managed to save a small sum. But the most valuable thing Amanda had earned wasn't money. It was independence. Throughout high school, she studied late into the night, entered every scholarship competition she could find, and pushed herself relentlessly. By the time the doors of college opened, Amanda walked through on her own merit, funded entirely by scholarships and awards she had rightfully earned. Not a single dollar came from her parents. Tiffany, on the other hand, the cherished older sister, never once had to worry about finances. Their parents cheerfully covered her tuition, even as Tiffany changed majors 3 times and took 6 long years to finish a communications degree. Each time she failed, their parents reassured her, "It's okay, honey. What matters is that you're happy." And whenever Amanda presented grades or accolades, all she usually got was a distracted nod and a flat "keep working hard." Amanda knew fairness had never existed in her household. But instead of letting that bitterness consume her, she turned it into fuel. She worked through college covering late-night library shifts and long hours behind cash registers. When her classmates complained about not having enough time for parties, Amanda would simply smile and say, "I don't have a choice." 4 years later, she graduated with a degree in finance and, more importantly, without a single cent of debt. On the day she crossed the stage, diploma in hand, she spotted her parents in the audience. But their gaze, as always, lingered on Tiffany, who had just returned home after her 3rd failed job. Amanda realized she would never be the center of their world. That very realization fueled her boldest decision, yet moving to Seattle. Seattle felt like a rebirth. The city, with its damp air, rolling hills, and hurried rhythm, gave her the sense of breathing for the first time. Here, no one knew her as the second child, the overlooked one. No one cared that she was the daughter who had to fend for herself because she wasn't the favorite. In Seattle, Amanda was simply Amanda, a young financial analyst ready to build her career on her own merit. The work was grueling. In those early days, Amanda clocked 60 hours a week, often pulling all-nighters to finish reports. She learned to pack her own lunches to save money to trim every unnecessary expense. Some nights, she sat alone in her tiny apartment, rain streaking the windows, asking herself, "Am I being too hard on myself?" But every time Tiffany's carefree face flashed in her mind, safe and spoiled in their parents' arms, Amanda clenched her fists and reminded herself, "No, this is my choice, and I'll see it through." Meanwhile, Tiffany stayed close to their parents. After marrying Kurt, a flashy real estate agent with a taste for luxury, her life became a carousel of parties, shopping sprees, and vacations. Even when Kurt had dry months with no income, Tiffany kept buying cars, kept traveling, kept spending recklessly, and of course, their parents continued dipping into their savings to cover her excesses. What cut Amanda the most wasn't Tiffany's extravagance, but the phone calls from her mother. One late evening, exhausted from another endless workday, Amanda's phone buzzed. On the screen flashed Mom. She hesitated for a beat before answering. "Amanda, how are you, sweetheart? Your father and I miss you so much." Her mother's voice cooed, honey sweet. Amanda closed her eyes, responding quietly. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy. Work's a lot right now." A silence stretched before her mother sighed. "Family should be together, Amanda. out there who takes care of you, who shares your burdens. The words pierced Amanda's chest. She wanted to cry, to scream that she had never truly been cared for. She wanted to ask if she had ever been comforted the way Tiffany had ever been sheltered instead of lectured. But Amanda said nothing. Her lips pressed into silence. On the other end, her mother carried on voice, brimming with pride, Tiffany's new dress, Kurt's vacation plans to California, endless anecdotes drenched in admiration. Amanda sat still, the phone hot against her ear, her stomach twisting tighter with every word. Was she wrong to leave? Was she selfish for choosing independence while her parents stayed behind, pouring their lives into Tiffany? Then suddenly, she heard Tiffany's laughter ring out faintly in the background, bright, careless, undeniable. And then Tiffany's voice sharp with casual arrogance. "Why are you talking to her for so long, Mom?" "Come on, let me tell you about the new car Kurt just ordered." At that moment, Amanda understood. She had never belonged in that family portrait. Leaving hadn't been about running away, it had been about finally breathing. Seattle became her proof that she could stand tall, that she could succeed without 1 cent from her parents. She worked her way up, her efforts recognized by superiors. Meanwhile, back in Denver, Tiffany basked in privilege, still sheltered from every consequence. The physical distance between Denver and Seattle was nothing compared to the real distance, the emotional gap, the gap in value, the invisible wall of favoritism built over years. And Amanda finally accepted the truth. Her chosen path would only take her further from the so-called perfect family everyone else admired. Autumn in Denver always carried a strange duality, gentle yet tinged with chill. The wind slipped through the rows of maple trees, scattering red and golden leaves across the pavement. Amanda drove the rental car from the airport toward her childhood home, her mind a swirl of anxious thoughts. It had been nearly 4 months since she'd last returned. Life in Seattle had been so consuming that she rarely thought about visiting. But then one afternoon, her father had called, his voice unusually stern. "Amanda, you need to come home this weekend. The family has something important to discuss." No explanation, no details, just an order. During the flight, Amanda couldn't stop asking herself what could be so urgent. Were her parents planning to retire? Was Tiffany expecting good news? A small, fragile part of her even hoped naively that maybe after all these years, her parents wanted to finally sit down and mend the fractures that had long divided them. But that hope felt as thin as a thread. When the car turned onto the familiar street of Maple, Amanda's heartbeat quickened. The house was still there, though its once blue paint had been replaced with a modern gray. The lights were on silhouettes shifting behind the curtains. Parked in the driveway was Tiffany and Kurt's luxury SUV gleaming under the street lamp. Amanda drew a deep breath, stepped out, and tightened her grip on her bag. The door opened, and the familiar scent of her mother's pot roast drifted out, stirring memories of childhood. Grace rushed forward to embrace her, words spilling out. "Amanda, you've lost weight. Is Seattle not treating you well? Are you eating properly?" Amanda forced a smile, answering politely. Her father Harold shook her hand instead of hugging her, a firm, distant grip. In the dining room, Tiffany and Kurt were already waiting. Tiffany gave her a quick glance, then smirked. "Oh, new haircut, very corporate." It was a backhanded compliment, but Amanda kept her polite smile. Kurt offered only a brief nod, his fingers fiddling with the expensive watch glinting on his wrist. Dinner began. At first glance, it looked like a peaceful family meal, the clink of silverware, Grace urging everyone to eat more, Tiffany's forced laughter. Yet beneath the calm surface, Amanda could feel an odd tension. Her parents, who usually brushed aside her work, were suddenly unusually interested. They asked about her company, her projects, her salary, her investments. At one point, Harold even remarked, "You've really got a head for numbers. I'm impressed." Amanda nearly choked on her water. In 32 years, her father had rarely, if ever, praised her. The unexpected compliment sent a chill down her spine. Throughout dinner, Tiffany kept exchanging loaded glances with their parents. Short, sharp looks filled with unspoken meaning, as though they were staging a performance she wasn't part of. Whenever Amanda spoke about work, Tiffany smirked, then turned to their parents with an expression equal parts smug and conspiratorial. Amanda chewed slowly, listening, watching. The unease in her chest grew heavier. They hadn't called her home just for small talk, and Tiffany's half-smile suggested she was waiting for something big. After dessert, Grace suggested moving to the living room for coffee. The air thickened. Harold settled into his armchair, cleared his throat, and carefully placed a brown folder on the table. Amanda's stomach tightened. Amanda Harold began voice grave. "We asked you here because there's something important we need to discuss as a family." Grace placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes glistening with nerves but nodding in agreement. Tiffany sat straighter, her eyes alight with anticipation, as if ready to unveil a winning hand. Amanda's spine turned cold. She stared at the folder. It seemed small, but radiated the weight of a boulder. A gnawing dread rose inside her. Her father opened the folder, pulling out a stack of papers. The rustling echoed like tearing fabric through the silence. "These are the mortgage documents for the new house we bought for Tiffany," and Kurt Harold said slowly. Time froze. Amanda's ears rang. All she could hear was the thunder of her heartbeat. She looked at Tiffany, who was smiling in triumph, as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. Tiffany exchanged a quick glance with their parents, a subtle nod that whispered, "The plan is complete." The room grew suffocating. The unusual praise during dinner, the secretive glances, Tiffany's mocking smile, everything now lined up into one cold truth. This wasn't a family meeting. It was a trap. Amanda swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "What exactly do you mean by this?" Grace's eyes shimmered with what looked like tears, but her hands still pushed the folder toward Amanda. "You've worked so hard all these years. You've saved money. Now it's time to help the family." Tiffany rested her chin on her hand, tilting her head, smiling faintly. "Exactly, Amanda. You don't have a husband, no kids to support. Sharing a little won't hurt, will it?" Kurt's eyes lit up, waiting for Amanda's agreement, as though it would free him from his financial noose. In that moment, Amanda felt the whole room spinning. Every late-night shift, every dollar she had saved, every rainy evening in Seattle, eating cold leftovers alone, all of it surged back in her mind, clashing with Tiffany's life of endless indulgence. And now, they wanted her, the overlooked daughter, to shoulder the burden of a mortgage worth hundreds of thousands. The room fell into heavy silence. The ticking clock on the wall echoed like a drumbeat. Tiffany's eyes locked on her, full of challenge, as if daring. "What will you do, Amanda? Refuse and be the ungrateful one, or sacrifice yourself once again?" Amanda inhaled deeply. She knew this moment would change everything. The rustle of papers still echoed in Amanda's head as her father slid the mortgage file toward her. The living room, once so familiar, suddenly felt foreign, like a cold stage where everyone else had rehearsed their lines, leaving her as the only one without a script. Harold's voice was firm, leaving no room for evasion. "Amanda, you've saved enough. Your mother and I are no longer young. We can't shoulder another debt. It's time you step up for this family." The words landed heavy as stone. Amanda's eyes locked on the numbers printed on the page, $350 a figure that meant far more than financial strain. It was a chain, a lifelong tether binding her to Tiffany's life of excess. She steadied her voice. "You really expect me to take on this loan? This is a 30-year commitment, not pocket change." Grace reached out, placing a trembling hand on Amanda's arm, her eyes brimming with tears. "You don't have a husband, no children. You've built up a good savings account. Helping your family this once, what's so wrong about that Tiffany would never let you suffer?" Amanda almost laughed bitterly. Tiffany wouldn't let me suffer. She's been taking everything that should have been mine my entire life. Taking a deep breath, Amanda tried to offer alternatives. If things are really difficult, Tiffany and Kurt could rent for a while, or buy something smaller in a less expensive neighborhood. Or I could help them make a financial plan, cut expenses. She didn't finish. Tiffany cut her off sharply, her tone like a blade. You really are obsessed with every penny, aren't you? Money, 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 that's all you care about. Is your miserable life in Seattle really so satisfying? A decent house in a good neighborhood is the bare minimum for raising children. But what would you know about family? You don't even have kids. Every word was a knife. Amanda's heart pounded, her ears rang. In a rush, childhood memories came crashing back. 12 years old, clutching an award certificate ignored because her parents were busy praising Tiffany. 16, working late-night shifts while Tiffany was gifted a brand new car. A college student scraping together rent while Tiffany changed majors 3 times on her parents' dime. All those memories now converged into one suffocating wave. Amanda met her parents' eyes, her voice trembling yet firm. I can't do this. This isn't just about money. This is my entire future. I've worked too hard to achieve financial freedom to live without debt. If I sign, all of that disappears. The room froze. Tiffany slammed her spoon onto the table, eyes blazing. See, she's always been jealous of me. She hates that Mom and Dad love me more. She'd rather see me homeless than help. Grace turned away, sobbing. Harold's face flushed red, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. Amanda, you're making yourself out to be ungrateful. We raised you, we gave you an education. And now, when we ask for just one thing, you refuse. You're saying money matters more to you than family? Amanda's hands felt like ice. She wanted to shout, raised me, every achievement I earned. I built myself. You never stood by me the way you did for Tiffany. But the words caught in her throat. Inside her mind, 2 voices clashed. One whispered, they're your parents. They're getting old. If you say no, you'll break their hearts. Maybe you should sacrifice just this once. The other screamed, if you sign, everything you've worked for is gone. You'll forever be the shadow paying the price for Tiffany's wastefulness. You'll never live for yourself again. Her heart hammered like war drums, childhood wounds, and buried resentment roaring back all at once. Amanda drew a long, shaky breath, and her voice came out clear, resolute. I'm sorry, but I will not sign. Silence. No one breathed. Then Harold slowly rose to his feet, his face hardened, eyes glacial. Do you even realize what you've just done? You've turned your back on your family. If you walk away with that answer, there will be consequences. The threat cut through Amanda like a blade of ice. But she did not back down. Her eyes welled with tears, yet her gaze was steady. I'm not turning my back. I'm protecting my own future. Helping family doesn't mean destroying yourself. Grace sobbed harder. Tiffany sneered. Kurt sat silent, frozen in place. The air in the room thickened, heavy enough to choke. Amanda stood, her legs heavy as stone, yet her chest somehow lighter than ever. She knew in that instant a hidden war had begun. Amanda thought that after that night, after the tearful confrontation and her father's cold threats in the old living room, things would eventually settle down. She had said no. And no matter how angry her father was, or how disappointed her mother might be, sooner or later they would have to accept reality. But she was wrong. One gray, rainy morning in Seattle, Amanda returned from work to find a thick envelope on her doorstep, stamped with the red seal of the court. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. A surge of dread swept through her, forcing her to lean against the wall to breathe. She tore the seal open, her vision blurring as the words on the page seemed to mock her. Plaintiffs Harold and Grace Williams. Defendant Amanda Williams. Amount $350,000. Reason verbal promise of financial support later withdrawn, causing emotional and financial damages to the family. Amanda froze. Her chest tightened. Her hands shook so violently the paper nearly slipped to the floor. She read and reread, hoping she had misinterpreted. But no, the words carved themselves into her mind like a knife. Her parents, the very people meant to protect and shield her, had become the ones dragging her into court. Her small apartment suddenly felt cavernous and unbearably cold. Amanda stumbled back to the couch and collapsed, clutching the papers as if holding proof of the cruelest betrayal of her life. A broken laugh escaped her lips. So this is the consequence Dad promised. Collapse in an empty room. That night, Amanda sat alone in the dark, her apartment lit only by the glow of her phone screen. Notifications buzzed endlessly. Each chime felt like a dagger. Messages poured in from relatives. Amanda, how could you do this to your parents? Selfish. Your sister lost her home and you refused to help. It's a disgrace to have a daughter like you. On Facebook, Tiffany posted a lengthy message without naming her, but everyone knew who it was aimed at. It breaks my heart when someone in the family would rather sit on piles of money than extend a hand to help their own sister. Money can buy a house, but it will never buy back the family bond that's been lost. Dozens, then hundreds of comments followed. Acquaintances, relatives, even old classmates chimed in, shaming Amanda. All that money and a heart of stone. Smart but soulless. Hope she gets a taste of poverty one day. Amanda dropped the phone, tears streaming down her face. It felt as if the entire world had turned against her. The walls of her apartment closed in the rain, tapping against the window as her sobs filled the silence. Inside, her mind whispers tore her apart. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I did choose money over family. But another voice roared back. No. You're protecting the life you built with your own hands. If you had signed, your future would be gone. This isn't family. This is exploitation. Her thoughts battled violently, pulling her between despair and defiance, leaving her in a haze of sleepless delirium through the night. A flicker of light friendship. The next day, Amanda reached out to the only person she trusted, Jasmine, her closest friend in Seattle. Her voice cracked as she told the story. Jasmine nearly screamed through the phone. They're suing you. Your own parents. Amanda, this isn't family conflict anymore. This is betrayal. That evening, Jasmine rushed over with hot food, finding Amanda surrounded by scattered papers, her head buried in her hands. They sat on the floor, sharing silence and broken sentences, until Jasmine finally said, her eyes sharp with determination. You need a lawyer, immediately. They're trying to pressure you into breaking, but you are not alone. Amanda looked at her vision blurred by tears. In that moment, she realized something profound. Family might no longer be her refuge, but there were still people who chose to stay. People who stood by her, not for money or obligation, but out of genuine care. The lawyer and the coming battle. A few days later, Amanda sat in the office of Elaine Patterson, a renowned Seattle attorney. The room was warm with amber lighting, bookshelves lined with heavy law volumes. Elaine skimmed the documents, her brows furrowing. From what I see, this case is almost baseless. They're relying on a so-called verbal promise with no evidence. But she paused, fixing Amanda with a steady gaze. What they may really be counting on is breaking you with psychological pressure. This is a power play. Amanda clenched her fists. I don't want to settle, but I'm scared. These are my parents. I never thought I'd sit across from them in court." Elaine nodded slowly, her tone calm but firm. "I've seen cases like this. When money enters the picture, the line between family and manipulation blurs. But remember this, the law doesn't protect favoritism or coercion. It only protects the truth." Her words sank deep like medicine, easing Amanda's panic. The world against her. Still, even as Amanda prepared her case, the outside world kept striking at her. Tiffany doubled down with dramatic social media posts. "Some people only think of themselves, but I believe justice and love will prevail." Hundreds shared it, leaving Amanda to endure an avalanche of condemnation. Messages arrived harsher than ever. "Don't bother showing up to family gatherings again. You should change your last name." Her phone lit up endlessly, each notification another wound. Amanda curled into her pillow, trembling tears soaking the fabric. What did I do wrong? Why is everyone on their side? Do I really deserve to be cast out just because I refused to carry my sister's debt? Her mind replayed childhood scenes, standing alone at the schoolyard fence, watching her parents cheer for Tiffany on stage. Later, performing piano at her own recital to an empty seat where her parents should have been. The memory fused with the present, crystallizing a truth she had long avoided. She had never truly belonged to this family. But this time, the pain wasn't just emotional neglect. It was war fought with contracts, courtrooms, and judges. This time, Amanda couldn't just endure silently. She had to fight back. Amanda lifted her head, wiping her tears. Outside, the Seattle rain still tapped against the glass. Inside, a storm far fiercer raged on. But deep within her, a small flame flickered to life. If her parents had chosen to make her the enemy, then at the very least, she would not let them destroy the life she had built. That morning, the Denver sky hung heavy and gray as if foreshadowing the storm ahead. Amanda stood in front of the county courthouse, her hands ice cold, even though they were buried deep in her coat pockets. Beside her attorney, Elaine Patterson, radiated an almost unnerving calm. She placed a steady hand on Amanda's shoulder and said firmly, "Just breathe normally. They may cry, they may twist the story, but the truth will stand with you." Amanda nodded, though inside she was trembling. This wasn't just a financial lawsuit. It was a life-or-death battle over family itself. And her opponents were not strangers, but her own parents and sister. The courtroom doors opened. Harsh fluorescent lights spilled down from above, illuminating every corner in an almost sterile brightness. Amanda stepped inside and felt like she had entered another world. Stiff, wooden benches, paneled walls the color of dark oak, the American flag looming behind the judge's bench. The air smelled of paper, old wood, and tension. She sat at the defendant's table. Across the room, her parents were already seated, their expressions hardened. Tiffany sat directly behind them, a tissue in hand, as if she had rehearsed her tears. Kurt was there too, his eyes darting everywhere but Amanda's. The gavel struck. Judge Carolyn Martinez, a stern, middle-aged woman with sharp, watchful eyes, announced the session open. The prosecution's play. The plaintiff's attorney rose first, his voice rich and theatrical. "Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking case. Parents who sacrificed their lives for their children have now been abandoned by their own daughter in their greatest time of need." Amanda Williams, successful, wealthy, promised to help her sister Tiffany, only to turn her back, leaving her family in despair. Harold was called to testify first. Dressed in a formal suit, he spoke with a trembling voice, portraying the image of a betrayed father. "I worked my whole life to raise my children." When Tiffany struggled, we thought Amanda, earning so much with her savings, would willingly step in. She didn't say no right away. We thought that meant yes. But then she walked away. We lost everything. Next came Grace. On the witness stand, she dabbed at her tears with shaky hands. We always loved Amanda just as much as Tiffany. We believed she would never abandon her family. When Tiffany lost her home, I trusted Amanda's kind heart. But she refused. She's changed. Money has made her forget family. The courtroom sat in silence as Tiffany took the stand. Her voice cracked tears dripping onto the tissue she clutched. My sister was always jealous of me. I know she thinks Mom and Dad loved me more. But what does jealousy matter in family? I believed that when we needed her, she would help. But no, she would rather watch me lose everything than spend a dime. A few sniffles echoed from the gallery. Amanda's chest tightened. She knew it was all a performance, but that didn't stop the sting. People often said wounds from strangers hurt less. Wounds from family cut straight to the bone. The defense. Then it was Elaine's turn. She didn't need theatrics. Her voice was steady, clipped each word slicing through the fog of emotion the plaintiffs had built. Your Honor, there is no evidence, none that Amanda ever agreed to take on this mortgage. No documents, no texts, no emails, only phrases like, we thought, or we believed. But the law does not rely on assumptions. The law requires truth. She lifted a file high. And here is the truth. Tiffany and Kurt lost their home because of reckless spending and mounting debt. These are their bank records, unpaid credit card balances, proof of repeated financial mismanagement, failed real estate transactions. The plaintiffs want Amanda to be their lifeline. But the law cannot force an innocent party to shoulder the irresponsibility of others. Approaching the witness stand, Elaine went straight for Harold Mr. Williams before purchasing the house for Tiffany. Did you have Amanda's explicit consent? Harold faltered. We believed she would agree. Elaine's tone sharpened, answer clearly. Did she ever say, yes, I will pay, or sign any document? After a long silence, Harold muttered, no. Elaine turned to Grace. Mrs. Williams, do you have any evidence, any at all, that Amanda agreed? Grace lowered her head, weeping. No, but we're family. We thought she would do the right thing. Elaine's reply was like ice. Thinking is not proof. Expectation is not obligation. Finally, Tiffany. Elaine's questions were swift. Have you ever repaid any of the money Amanda loaned you in the past? Tiffany stammered, I intended to. So no, you never repaid, correct? Tiffany fell silent. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The judge's verdict. When all testimonies were done, Judge Martinez sat in silence, her face unreadable under the sterile white lights. Then she looked directly at Harold and Grace. I need a clear answer. Did your daughter Amanda ever explicitly agree clearly and directly before you purchased the house for Tiffany? The room was so silent that even breathing seemed too loud. Harold glanced at Grace, then at Tiffany. At last, he bowed his head. No. A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Amanda felt her heart skip a beat. Judge Martinez nodded, her voice firm. Expectations are not contracts. Family bonds do not create legal obligations. I find this case without merit. The lawsuit is dismissed. Her gavel came down hard. Bang. The sound reverberated through the chamber like thunder, shattering every illusion. Amanda had won. Yet when she looked across the courtroom, there was no triumph in her heart. Her parents sat slumped faces, gray with defeat. Tiffany sobbed, but not from remorse, from rage, from the bitter loss of what she had expected to gain. Her glare burned into Amanda a silent vow. You'll pay for this. Elaine squeezed Amanda's shoulder and whispered, You did the right thing. Stand tall. You just reclaimed your freedom. Amanda drew a deep breath and rose. Her legs trembled, but her eyes blazed. She knew this battle wasn't truly over. But for now at least, she had won in the only place where truth mattered, the courtroom. The echo of the judge's gavel still haunted Amanda's mind as she stepped out of the courtroom. A part of her wanted to collapse right there, not because she had lost, but because this victory felt like a blade splitting her heart in two. Outside on the courthouse steps, the sky was piercingly blue, a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside her. Her father Harold stood stiff and furious, his face flushed with anger. He no longer looked at her like a father would at his daughter, but like a stranger consumed with hatred. "You chose money over family," he spat. "You are no longer my daughter." Her mother Grace crumbled into sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Amanda, I hoped you would change. How could you be so cruel? This family sacrificed so much for you." And Tiffany, unable to contain herself, lunged toward Amanda, screaming until her voice broke. "You'll pay for this. You think you've won. No, you've only just begun destroying yourself." Kurt grabbed Tiffany's arm, trying to pull her back, but she shook him off violently. Mascara smeared down her face, her eyes burning red with rage. Around them, the courthouse plaza erupted in chaos. Passers-by stopped to gawk. A few reporters raised their cameras' flashes, going off like lightning. Amanda kept walking silent, every accusation, every cry, every glare stabbing into her chest like a dagger. She had won the case, but the cost was losing her family, or perhaps more truthfully confirming that she had never really belonged to them in the first place. The hollow flight home. The flight back to Seattle felt endless. Amanda sat by the window watching clouds drift by, as if her own life was slipping out of her control. In her hands, she still clutched the thick stack of legal papers, now nothing more than scars carved onto paper. When she finally reached her apartment, she shut the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. But there was no relief. The familiar space felt cavernous cold. Dropping her bag to the floor, she sank down, burying her face in her hands. Tears spilled freely, not from defeat, but from the crushing emptiness of victory. "I've spent my entire life fighting to prove myself, and in the end, all I have left is loneliness." Her phone lit up again. Notifications kept pouring in. Tiffany had posted another long rant online painting Amanda as the sister who abandoned her family for money. The comments were vicious relatives lashing out old classmates, sneering strangers echoing Tiffany's narrative. Amanda tossed the phone onto the sofa, curled into herself on the floor, wishing she could disappear. A new fear. A few days later, when Amanda thought the storm of gossip had begun to die down, a text arrived from her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Amanda, a woman came by the building claiming to be your sister. She asked about your income, your work hours. It felt off, so I didn't tell her anything. Just be careful." Amanda's heart clenched. "Tiffany." She rushed to the balcony and peered down at the street. Among the bustling crowd, she caught a glimpse of flash of blonde hair, a slim frame eyes darting around nervously as if searching for prey. "Tiffany." Fear washed over Amanda. This was no longer just hatred. It was obsession, dangerous and invasive. Tiffany wasn't accepting her defeat in court. She was trying to worm her way back into Amanda's life, to drag her down with her. That night, Amanda couldn't sleep. Rain drummed against the glass, each drop amplifying her unease. In the dark, Tiffany's words replayed in her mind, echoing like a curse. "You'll pay for this. The weight of victory." The next day at work, colleagues congratulated Amanda. "You beat a ridiculous lawsuit," they said with smiles. She forced polite nods. They saw her win, but none of them could understand what it cost. In meetings, her body sat at the conference table, but her mind drifted elsewhere. She kept seeing her parents walking out of the courtroom, their backs to her. She wanted to scream, "I never chose money over family. I chose myself." But no one would listen. That evening, back at her apartment, Amanda's eyes landed on an old family photo. It was taken in their backyard years ago. Tiffany was in the center, flanked by Harold and Grace, while Amanda stood off to the side, her smile strained. Looking at it now, it felt like a prophecy. She had never truly been part of their picture. Stalked by shadows. A week later, the building's security guard stopped her in the lobby. Someone came asking about your unit, said she was a relative. We didn't let her through, but you should be careful. Amanda didn't need to ask who it was. Tiffany. Her home, once a sanctuary, no longer felt safe. She changed her door code, installed extra cameras, but security measures couldn't silence the gnawing dread inside her. The nightmares began soon after. She dreamed Tiffany was pounding on her door, screaming, her eyes blazing with rage. You owe me. You'll never escape. Amanda would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, her heart hammering wildly. The courtroom victory had not freed her. It had only opened a new front in the battle. The toxic ties of her family still reached for her, like shadows she couldn't outrun. The bitter price, even with Jasmine's unwavering presence, even with her career still intact, Amanda felt a hollow space inside her. Yes, she had been vindicated. But she wasn't relieved. Instead, she was adrift, caught between two worlds, no longer part of her blood family, but not yet free of their haunting grasp. One rainy evening in Seattle, Amanda sat by her window pen in hand, journaling under the soft patter of rain. Winning and losing don't matter sometimes. The price of freedom is loneliness. I won in court, but in my heart, I don't feel like a victor. She closed the journal, rested her forehead against the cool glass, and let the sound of rain mix with her quiet sigh. And the long days of living in fear and obsession, Amanda realized that if she allowed herself to remain trapped in the whirlpool of pain, she would never truly break free. She needed a new path, and the first step was therapy. Dr. Diana's office was tucked away on a quiet Seattle street. The small room glowed with warm, golden light potted plants placed carefully in corners to create a sense of calm. Amanda sat on a cushioned chair, her hands clasped tightly, her heart racing as she began to speak. They sued me, doctor. My own parents sued me over money, and I won. But why do I feel nothing but loss? Diana listened, her face gentle, her tone free of judgment. Amanda, you are grieving, not over money, but over something you longed for all your life, unconditional love from your family. A legal victory can't fill that void, but you can learn how to heal yourself. The session stretched over weeks. Amanda slowly learned to give names to her wounds, abandonment, comparison, dismissal. Diana encouraged her to write down her memories, to face each scar instead of burying them. Amanda cried often, but each time she left the office, the weight felt a little lighter. At Diana's suggestion, Amanda joined a support group for adults rejected or manipulated by their families. On the first day, she entered the circle, nervously, strangers seated in a ring. But as she listened to their stories, a woman swindled out of her inheritance by a brother, a man cut off by parents for refusing to bankroll his younger sibling, Amanda realized she was not alone. When it was her turn, her voice trembled. I used to think that if I worked harder, earned more, my parents would be proud of me. But in the end, all they wanted was the money I could give. When I refused, they sued me. It felt like the whole world turned its back. A middle-aged woman reached for her hand and whispered, "We understand. Here you are not a burden. You are not the villain. You are one of us." In that moment, Amanda broke down, but her tears were different this time. They were tears of release. She began to believe she could find support in people who weren't bound to her by blood. Building a chosen family, Jasmine remained her steadfast anchor. Whenever Amanda collapsed, her friend appeared with warm meals, with kind words, or with the kind of silence that spoke louder than advice. You don't have to be strong every day, Jasmine would remind her. Some days, just existing is enough. Then there was Aunt Laura Harold's younger sister, who had lived through something eerily similar. Laura called every week sharing her story. 20 years ago, my father did the exact same thing to me. I said no, and he branded me a traitor. I spent years in pain, but I built a different family with friends, with a husband who loved me. And I learned something: sometimes family is what we choose, not what we're forced into. Her words were a lantern in Amanda's darkness. For the first time, Amanda saw a future that wasn't defined by Harold, Grace, or Tiffany, a future that could still be full of love, just of a different kind. Amanda began to open up more to those around her. At work, colleagues who had quietly shielded her during the trial now became close friends. They invited her to dinners, shared their struggles, and asked about her well-being with genuine care. Her neighbors, too, started to feel like kin. Mrs. Rodriguez, the woman who once warned her about Tiffany lurking around, now often stopped by with fresh-baked bread. She would smile warmly and say, "Sweetheart, I may not be your blood, but I think of you as family." Amanda's heart softened. Piece by piece, she was stitching together a new kind of family, one built not on favoritism or unreasonable demands, but on sincerity. A turning point. The real turning point came when Amanda accepted an invitation to volunteer with a local organization. They needed someone to teach basic financial management skills to women escaping abusive relationships and poverty. On her first day, she stepped into a small room where a dozen women sat waiting, many clutching their children, eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Amanda took a deep breath and began explaining how to budget, how to save even the smallest amounts, and most importantly, how to believe they deserved a better life. "I was once treated as if I would never be enough," she told them. "But every dollar you save today is a brick you lay for your freedom tomorrow." Slowly, the women's eyes began to brighten, shimmering with hope. At the end of the session, a young mother approached, gripping Amanda's hand, her voice breaking. "You gave me the belief that I can start over. Thank you." Amanda's heart trembled not from pain, but from joy. She realized her worth was not tied to clinging to a toxic family. Her value was in transforming her pain into strength and in helping others do the same. Redefining family. As time passed, Amanda stopped tormenting herself with the question, "Why didn't my family love me?" Instead, she replaced it with, "I deserve love, but not at any cost." Her journals, once filled with despair, now brimmed with reflections on volunteering, warm conversations with Jasmine, and loving calls from Aunt Laura. She saw clearly that she had stepped out of Tiffany's shadow, not because she had won in court, but because she was building a meaningful life on her own terms. One gentle afternoon, Amanda sat on a park bench, sunlight filtering through the trees, as children laughed and played nearby. She wrote, "Family isn't always the place we're born into. Sometimes family is what we find those who choose to stay by our side. I lost one family, but in return, I gained an entirely new world. And this time, it is built on truth, trust, and love without conditions." Amanda closed the notebook, lifted her face to the light, and for the first time in years felt at peace. It was a late summer evening in Seattle. The rain had just passed, leaving the streets shimmering with silvery puddles. Amanda sat on her apartment balcony, a glass of red wine swirling in her hand, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The Seattle skyline glittered before her, the Space Needle piercing the night sky, its lights reflecting across Elliott Bay like shards of broken glass scattered over water. But her heart was anything but calm. The trial had ended long ago, yet unease still lingered. Questions haunted her. Why did my parents favor Tiffany so completely? Why were they willing to destroy me rather than face the truth? One afternoon, Amanda received a call from Aunt Laura, the woman who had stood by her ever since the lawsuit. Laura's voice was heavy, tinged with both sorrow and resolve. "Amanda, there's something you should know. It doesn't excuse what happened, but maybe it will help you understand. Amanda stayed silent listening as Laura exhaled a long, weary sigh before beginning a story that sounded like an old diary being opened. Your father Harold wasn't always the cold man you see now. When he was a boy, he lived through very dark years. Your grandparents' business failed. When Harold was just 12, the family nearly lost everything. There were winter nights when the house sat in darkness because there wasn't money for electricity. He watched his mother cry his father drink himself into oblivion, and he swore he'd never let himself fall into that kind of ruin. Laura's voice shook slightly, but that fear became too big, too consuming. It turned into a lifelong obsession. Harold believed that as long as there was money, as long as one child was successful, the family could be saved. And he chose Tiffany. He poured everything into her, thinking that if he protected her at all costs, their family would never collapse like before. What he didn't realize was that the cycle was still repeating itself, just in another form. Amanda gripped the phone tightly. Silence stretched between them. In her mind, she pictured her father, a man standing in the shadows, shielding Tiffany at every failure, while she, the younger daughter, was left to fend for herself. Amanda sighed deeply. I get it now, Aunt Laura. Dad was haunted by his childhood by the fear of losing everything. But understanding doesn't mean forgiveness. The past doesn't give him the right to sacrifice me. Laura's voice softened. Exactly. You don't have to forgive unconditionally. What matters is recognizing the cycle. If you don't stop it, it will keep going. Her words rang in Amanda's ears like a bell of clarity. That night, Amanda opened her old leather journal and sat by the window overlooking the city. The night breeze carried the salty tang of the bay mingling with the glitter of lights from afar. Slowly, she wrote each word, bleeding her heart onto the page. I now understand part of the reason. My father carried the terror of poverty within him. He believed that by investing everything into one child, the family would never lose everything as he once saw. But that cycle turned me into an outsider. It turned love into favoritism, family into injustice. It hurts, but I will not repeat it. I must be the one to end the cycle. I will not live by fear. I will not play favorites. I will not burden someone I love simply because I love them more. I will choose love, rooted in fairness, rooted in respect. Tears splashed onto the page, blurring the ink. Yet they were tears of release. Leaning back in her chair, Amanda closed her eyes and let her father's image rise in her mind. Harold was no longer just the cold man who had called her selfish. Deep down, he was also the 12-year-old boy shivering in a dark house, clutching a thin blanket, swearing he would never let his family fall into ruin again. Amanda whispered softly into the night, I understand you, Dad, but I will not live like you. Breaking the cycle. The next day, Amanda shared part of this story with her support group. When she explained that her father had grown up in poverty and fear, many nodded. Some wept. One man confessed I was that child too. And now, I've become my father, passing my fears onto my kids. Hearing your story, I realize I need to break the cycle too. Amanda realized that telling the truth wasn't just healing her, it was helping others as well. That weekend, she sat in her favorite cafe, golden sunlight pouring through the windows. She opened her laptop to prepare new material for her volunteer program financial literacy workshops for women in need. This time, she added a new lesson: how to recognize toxic family cycles and how to break free. She typed, money can be a tool, but don't let it become the chains of family. If you grew up in favoritism, remember understanding the past doesn't mean accepting the present. You have the right to rewrite your story. As her fingers flew across the keyboard, Amanda smiled. She was no longer the abandoned child begging for love. She was becoming a guide for herself and for others. That spring in Seattle came late. The rains dragged on through March before finally giving way to the first rays of sunlight breaking through fresh green leaves. Amanda sat in her 20th floor office, sunlight glinting off the polished wood desk. In front of her lay an important contract, an offer to become lead financial analyst, a position she once thought she'd never be strong enough to reach. She thought back to herself a year ago, frail, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, clutching a lawsuit file in the dark. And yet here she was, now smiling as she signed her name in steady strokes. Her career had not only recovered from the storm, it was thriving. But it wasn't only her career that was healing. Amanda's heart, once closed off, began to open. She met Ryan, a fellow financial consultant, at a conference. At first, she kept her guard up. She had lost faith in the very concept of family, and the idea of starting a new relationship terrified her. But Ryan was different. He listened more than he spoke. He respected her boundaries. He never pushed. One evening, as they walked along the bay together, Ryan asked suddenly, "Do you think real love is unconditional sacrifice?" Amanda was quiet for a long time. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt water. Finally, she whispered, "No. I think real love is when two people build together and neither has to lose themselves in the process." Ryan nodded, squeezing her hand tighter. In that moment, Amanda realized she was ready for a new chapter, not by erasing the pain of her past, but by choosing a healthier kind of love. Tiffany's fall. As Amanda rebuilt, Tiffany unraveled. After losing the case, her marriage with Kurt began to fracture. The glamorous photos on social media vanished, replaced by bitter, cryptic posts. And then one day, Amanda received an email with a single-word subject line, "Help." Inside was a long message. "Amanda, I know I don't have the right to ask, but Kurt's gone. The house is being repossessed again. I have no one left. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for advice. What do I do to survive?" Amanda sat frozen. For the first time, Tiffany wasn't demanding money or privilege. She was asking for something simple: guidance. Amanda drew a deep breath, then typed, "Tiffany, you can start over. Go to community financial counseling, create a step-by-step debt plan, take a budgeting course, learn to control money instead of letting it control you. You've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean you can't change." She attached a list of local resources along with lessons she now taught in her volunteer classes. The next day, Tiffany replied with a single line, "Thank you." No apology, no admission of guilt. But to Amanda, it was still a shift. For the first time, Tiffany saw her not as a walking wallet, but as someone who could offer wisdom, lessons in love and boundaries. That night, Amanda sat by her window, gazing out at the glittering Seattle skyline. She opened her journal and wrote, "I once thought love meant limitless sacrifice. But now I know love isn't about turning yourself into an endless supply. True love is when boundaries are respected. And if anyone says boundaries kill love, they are wrong. It is selfishness, manipulation, and endless demands that destroy it." She closed the journal and smiled softly. No tears stained the page this time. Time moved on. Amanda continued down her new path, a steady career, a healthy relationship, a chosen family built from friends and people who truly respected her. Yet deep down, she knew her story wasn't completely finished. Tiffany might change, or she might not. One day, her parents might reach out, or they might never turn back. But Amanda was prepared. This time, no one would ever shatter the boundaries she had built. The open ending. Sitting in front of a camera sharing her story with an audience, Amanda spoke slowly, her voice carrying the weight of lived truth. "I've learned that not every kind of love is worth keeping. Love without respect is nothing more than a chain. I choose freedom. I choose self-respect. And I choose to live a life that truly belongs to me. What about you? If faced with the choice, endless sacrifice, or the right to be yourself, what would you choose? The screen faded to black, leaving the question hanging an echo in the minds of those who listened.